Oh hi, Taryn here. Welcome to this week's piece. So we are doing the Halloween challenge put on by Lemons to Lemonade, and this one was really interesting. I kind of did a little Frankenstein action here, and I'm pretty impressed with it. So if you guys want to see what happened, go ahead and keep watching.
So that's what we have to start with, just an old headboard, and I have the very bottom of an old armoire. So I'm just starting with the headboard, taking everything apart on it because it's actually for a queen size bed, which is slightly too long for the lower part of the armoire. So I'm going to strip it down, figure out how wide I'm going to end up needing it by just putting it up next to the lower part of the armoire, measuring it out, and I know that's where I'm going to need to make my cuts off the side to make it fit perfectly. Now we're going to cut those off. So here I'm using my circular saw. I just clamped down a straight edge, so I have a gray edge to run along the side of to give me a straight line. I'm not to the point where I feel comfortable trying to make a straight line with just the steadiness of my hand. So I typically will clamp up whatever straight edge I can find that is about the length of my piece, and I can just use that to make sure that I'm getting a nice clean cut. Now, if you find that you're getting splintering on your piece, you can use a piece of tape to run the saw along, and it will help with splintering. This piece was particle board with a veneer over the top, so it didn't really splinter that much. Now I'm just making the cut on the other side of the headboard, and then we will move on to the top part of the bench. We're making a bench, obviously. So I just went and bought a piece of MDF, and I use this because it's what the headboard was made of, and I wasn't really worried about using wood with it because it's going to be put on really securely. It has that lip around the edge to give it more stability, so I wasn't worried about sagging or anything in the future. And then it was actually the perfect width, which was awesome, so I didn't have to cut there, but it was just a little bit too deep, so I'm making that cut to make sure that it fits the depth of the bench. And it's the exact same process, only I'm using a longer stick here to clamp down and guide my saw. All right, this next part killed me, and I'm gonna go over it a little bit because there's part of it here where you can hopefully find some use. But whomever did this repair before did a terrible job. They just kind of glued some boards down, did a billion staples and pin nails into this. They thought they were helping, they were not. So you can see that the wood has started to, it's sticking out the back edge here, which is pretty typical. However, the front of it has shrunk out away from the front of the drawer, so there's a gap there. So all I was trying to do was undo the nails in the back and slide them forward. But because they did this huge weird patch job along the bottom there, I couldn't. It's glued and pin nailed and just all the things to get that on there. So I couldn't just slide those in. So I then have to spend, it was about an hour trying to remove this extra piece here, just so that I could get those two boards to slide all the way into the drawer again and then re-tack those down. So that was not exciting, but you know, we're getting these really old pieces. Not everybody knows how to work on old furniture or just furniture in general, and so we a lot of times have to deal with shoddy repair work. That's just part of it, and I did what I could. So I'm just removing this hardware. I'm not going to be able to use it. It's already broken, and the metal is actually just, it's done. It's sad because they're really cool pieces, but the ring pulls were already taken off of them, and I'm just gonna add on some new hardware now. So that's what I was working with on the bottom there. I just have to go through, remove all those nails, try and scrape up the glue as much as I can, and blech, it was not fun. But once I finally got it removed enough to be able to pull those boards out, I could easily get them back in and hammer them forward to where that the boards fit in nice and even again, and there's no gap in the front of the drawer. And then I'm just going to add a few pin nails in the back just to hold them in place, so it allows still for expansion and contraction. Once I got that handled, I just kind of went back and tried to clean up as much of the mess as I possibly could along the bottom, because I do want this to slide smoothly along the bottom and the tracks. So I took my sander and just had a go at it. And that actually worked better than expected, so I just went through with my wax and gave everything that was touching any other part of the drawer a good waxing on both surfaces. So all the glides on the drawer and on the inside of the case. Next, I'm going to be gluing down the top. I decided to do a dry fit just so I could kind of see what it was going to look like. And then I'll take my wood glue and put it on all the gluable surfaces. So on the top here, and then on the underside of the bench top. I'm going to go around and try and make sure I get as much covered as I can. If you want to use a brush, you totally can. I always just use my hands. This is water soluble and it comes right off, so it's not a big deal for me to just use my hands. Then I try and line it up as best I can. If you're getting a little glue squeeze out, that's actually great. You want that. Just make sure you clean it up before it dries, or else you will be sad trying to get it off later. All right, so I'm just going to pull out the drawer and place it on top along with the back, the headboard that's going to be the back, just to give me a little weight to hold that board down in place so that it's not going to move or anything while I'm nailing the top on. So if you just want to use glue, that's fine, but I'm going to use my brad nailer and I'm just measuring out the depth that I need so that I can shoot up underneath in the bottom through to the top. So that's going to help it just give it a little extra strength there, because most people, when they pick things up and move them, they move them by that lip. So I found this stuff on Amazon. It's like bendable trim, and I just thought it was so fun, and I really wanted to use it on something, and I thought, what better than around an MDF edge that I don't want exposed. So this is my first time using it, and I actually really loved it. I do recommend it. I think it actually worked out awesome. It has an adhesive back that was actually surprisingly strong. I don't foresee any issues with this. However, I did do a little extra steps, which I'm not sure is necessary, but it just made me feel better. So as I'm applying this, I'm making sure that it lines up to the top perfectly, because I don't want anything sticking up to be able to catch on anything. But I'm just kind of going around, pushing it in, making sure that I'm getting it smoothed on as much as possible, just with a really strong, tight seal. And then as it goes around the corners, it will kind of crack in that spot because it's a 90 degree, it's not just a sloping edge. But it cracks in a nice way, and I'm going to be painting over the top of it, so you can't tell after it's finished. And then I'm just going to go back through with my heat gun, and kind of my thoughts were it was going to warm up the adhesive and help it kind of marry with the MDF and get it really suctioned on there. And as you can see, it just cuts really easily with scissors. Then of course I'm using my 123 primer in gray. I'm doing this because MDF is very porous, and I don't want anything to happen to this where it gets wet just going through paint or a top coat or anything like that and it starts bubbling up. I just want to make sure I'm really protecting that and sealing it in. So I did several coats of the primer, and I don't think we'll have any issues. And then these are just going to be the brackets that I put on the back to attach the headboard to the bottom. So I'll show you this later, and the reason I'm doing it like this is because I want to make it removable. If somebody ever wanted to use this as just a bench without a back, they totally could, and it won't be marred at all on the surface. So if you wanted to, you could pocket hole in the top back down into the bench, but I wanted to make sure this was removable, and if somebody wanted to put this, say, at like the end of their bed, they could remove the back and put it down there, and it would work that way too. So these are my thoughts. I'm just saying them out loud right now. It'll make more sense in a minute. And with the drill bit that I used, I am using my pocket hole screws, and the drill bit has kind of a countersunk feature so that when I drill this in, the screws will go all the way down. This I'm just testing out, so I'm not going to keep this on right now. I will attach it later once everything's painted. And I did also prime the headboard because it is made of MDF, just like the top, and I want to make sure that I get a consistent paint job. And although I'm not too worried about the MDF doing anything crazy underneath the veneer, I don't want it to do anything crazy along the sides where I made all those cuts, so I have to do it all over the entire thing. Now the hardware didn't have any drilled through holes, but they did have kind of like these little pin nail holes, so I'm just going through with my wood filler and filling those in. And then if I happen to see any deep gashes or scratches in the front of the drawer here, I just filled those in as well. So I was going to go straight in with my black paint. This whole piece was going to start out with a black base, and then I had an idea. And this is typically what happens to me. I usually have no idea what's going to happen to my piece by the time I'm finished. I'll get kind of like a general idea, and then inspiration will hit and things will take a turn. So that's what happened here. It really felt like it needed to be fancier, so I got my joint compound. This stuff is super, super inexpensive, and it is awesome for this because you can mix it to your desired consistency. So I'm just taking the joint compound, adding a little bit of water until it's of a spackling type thickness, and we're going to do a raised stencil. So all I do is kind of dump out a pile, and I use my scraper and literally just pull it across and scrape it across the stencil, and it works really, really well. So I'm just using my heat gun. You don't have to do this. You can absolutely wait till it dries on its own, but I wanted to get the show on the road, so I used my heat gun, and that way it'll dry up the edges. I didn't dry the entire thing. I just did the edges where the stencil would overlap. That way I could get the last stencil put on there. And once that was dry, I just went over with a sanding sponge and just lightly gave it a once over to get off any of the really, really high points. I don't mind texture in this. In fact, I think it looks really cool. But if there's anything that was like sticking out more than I really wanted it to, I just kind of brush it down and it comes off really easily. And now we can paint. So this is just your basic coat of paint. I did a lot of swirling and back and forth and every which way because I wanted the top to be textured. And also when you're going over a raised stencil, you kind of want to do swirling actions and get your brush moving around, or else you will find that you have missed spots in the raised parts of the stencil, and there's like peaks and valleys, and you just kind of have to try and get them as best you can. And even on the first coat, once it dries, you'll go back on the second and be like, wow, I missed a whole bunch of spots. But it's fine, you'll get it on the second coat. And now we can start on the second coat. So second coat is the kind of finishing coat. You want it to be very smooth and neat. I will always start with a little bit of water to keep my paint moving smoothly, and I will also add on a little extra paint when I'm first going and then smooth them out with long, smooth strokes after I get it on. Okay, so here's the fun part. I add in a little water, add in more black, and I'm just going to work in sections here because I want my paint to stay wet, and since black is the main color, it's really, really forgiving when I'm adding in these other colors. So I kind of worked in quarter panels and then figure out where I want to go from there and what parts I want to highlight, and then I use a green, a blue, and an almost plummy purpley pink color. And I highlight wherever I want things to kind of pop out. So around any edges, just to bring light into places and bring the stencils out and have them show off a little bit more. And I just didn't want it to be a super, super boring solid black piece. So I gotta amp up my game. And this is super easy. You're just adding in the color and kind of a blob, and then you'll use that same brush to feather out the edges, and then you can go back in with the black if you don't quite like it and rein it in a little if you want to. You kind of just go with how you feel and figure out what looks best on your specific piece. Again, you can add water to keep your paint smoothly gliding and doing what you want it to do. All right, one more step to really make this thing pop. So see how kind of flat it is on the right, but on the left, it's incredible? Yeah. So what we're gonna do is take this metallic paint and we are going to very, very, ever so softly brush this over the top. And when I say ever so softly, I mean you're barely dipping your brush in to where it's just these tiny little beads on, and then also dabbing it off. So getting it on there. It's almost a dry brush, but you can also go back in with your water and spritz it down, mellow it out, and then go back and kind of brush it again to smooth it out so that it's getting a really, really soft look. And you'll just see it brings the stencil out so much more. It's just amazing. And then I'm just gonna do the same thing here. Just very lightly brush over the details around the trim just to make those pop. And then to carry this through to the bottom so that the bottom just doesn't look incredibly bland, I'm going to take the stencil and using the same metallic paint, I'm going to add this on. Now this stencil is a redesign with Prima stencil, however I needed it shrunk down, so I shrunk it down and am just using that. The original stencil is quite a bit larger. And now it's time to seal. So I keep a bottle of this poly already mixed up. It's just poly mixed in with a little bit of black paint. It's usually either black or the iron gate that I use. Either one works. It just prevents the kind of cloudiness that you can sometimes get polying over a dark color. And I just kind of put a bunch on there and then smooth it out with long, smooth, even strokes for the finishing kind of brush stroke there. Super easy, doing it to the whole piece. I did 2 coats all over the entire piece and then 3 coats to the part of the bench where you would sit on. And then I'll attach the top to the back by using the brackets that we have already drilled out and made and everything. So yeah, that's pretty much it, and we are finished with this project.
Well, what'd you think? I hope you enjoyed this whole piece and you learned some new things. To those of you who are new to my channel, welcome. I hope you subscribe and stay a while. I do a lot of things like Frankensteining pieces, quite a few repairs, lots of blending, lots of decoupage, and all kinds of other stuff. So if you guys enjoy that, feel free to stick around and hang out with me. And P.S. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of my subscribers in the future and in the past. You guys are awesome. You guys just keep me moving and dedicated to doing this. I'm just so thankful for you. All right, let's get you some pictures.